All right, seeing as we have a quorum, I'll call to order this meeting of the Common Council of the City of Bloomington for Wednesday, November 19th, 2025. Our council president, Councilmember Stossberg, is not able to be here tonight. She may arrive later, but that's why I'm chairing the meeting for now. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Flaherty.
Here.
Ruff.
Here.
Rollo.
Here.
Piedmont Smith.
Here.
Daly. Here. Zulik.
Here.
Rosenbarger. Here. And Asari.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to summarize our agenda for tonight, we will have one set of minutes for approval. Then we will move on to the reports section of the agenda, where we have reports from council members, then reports from the mayor, city clerk, city offices, city boards and commissions. I don't believe we have any in that category tonight. Reports from council committees, although I don't think we have any of those either. And then reports from the public. So that's the first opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda tonight. Then we move on to appointments to boards and commissions, and we do have at least one appointment this evening. Then we will move on to legislation for first readings. We have Ordinance 2025-19 to amend Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Removal and Impound of Vehicles. Then we will have Ordinance 2025-20 to amend Chapter 4.32 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Non-Consensual Towing Business in regard to Title 4, updating permissible towing and storage fees for non-consensual towing services. Then we have Ordinance 2025-44 to amend Title 10 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Wastewater in regard to septic hauler rate adjustment. And then we have an appropriation ordinance 2025-14 to specially appropriate from the general fund, motor vehicle highway fund, local road and street fund, parks and recreation general fund, public safety, local income tax fund, Common Council Jack Hopkins Fund, Solid Waste Fund, and Fleet Maintenance Fund, expenditures not otherwise appropriated. And all those four items for first reading, the way that we do business is that we literally just read them into the record, and there's no public comment on those items. If people are interested in any of those four items, they will be discussed, and there will be public comment on December 3rd. Then we will move on to legislation for second readings and resolutions, where we have Resolution 2025-20 to fund emergency food services with a distribution from the Jack Hopkins Social Service Grant Program. Ordinance 2025-45 to fix the salaries of all elected city officials for the city of Bloomington for the year 2026. And Ordinance 2025-41 to amend Title 20 Unified Development Ordinance of the Bloomington Municipal Code in regard to a use table amendment for single-room occupancy buildings. And we do have two amendments for that. Then comes a period of additional public comment on items that are not on the agenda. And then we will review the draft council schedule for calendar year 2026. And if we're ready to, we can vote on that. And then we shall adjourn. So let us move to the minutes.
I move that the minutes from July 23rd, 2025 be approved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and since we have no council members that are on Zoom tonight, we can do a voice vote. But first, are there any questions or corrections? No? Okay, Deputy Clerk McDowell, will you please, oh wait, I just said we can do a voice vote. So all in favor of approving those minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those minutes are adopted. We will next move on to reports from council members, and we'll start on my left with Councilmember Asari. Do you have a report this evening?
No, well, yes, just two quick things. The first thing is that for those living in the Maple Heights district, I'm going to be attending the Homeowners Association or the neighborhood meeting this Monday, and so if you're there, I would love to meet with you. I know that's happening over Zoom. Just a general report that I think Innovation Week 2 weeks ago, we haven't had a chance to read out from that, was a great success. I know many of my colleagues were able to come to some of the sessions, and I think, and thank you to the Trade District and the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce and IU for putting on a fantastic event. I would recommend, if anybody has a chance, particularly to look at some of the notes from the last session around arts. There were some very actionable things there for us that we could, that aren't sort of very low-hanging, I would say that are low-hanging fruit. So I think those are all posted online. And then the third thing is that Councilmember Daley and I hosted together with Commissioner Jody Madeira, I think a fairly successful first community conversation around food security. And I think there'll be a lot more coming out of it, but the main thing is, I think the main takeaway from my vantage point is that despite the government opening back again, Bloomington has a persistent problem around food security. I think we're not really meeting the target of meeting the vast need in this community. There are a lot of people that are doing a lot, but they need a lot of help, particularly of manpower and, of course, finances. And so, of course, we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that later today, but just in terms of reporting out on activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenbarger?
Thank you. I would like to say ditto on the Maple Heights meeting. It's on Zoom. Did you mention that part? And okay, I will be there too. That's it for now.
All right, Councilmember Zulik.
Yes, just briefly. This is not technically a committee report because I'm just telling y'all what I'm working on. But at the council Committee on Special Processes, we decided that we wanted to move forward with identifying how we might adopt a consent agenda for City Council. And I have been working on that with our council attorney, Attorney Lehner. And so I just want to thank Attorney Lehner for the time that she spent on this. And hopefully we will have shorter meetings, y'all. So thank you. That's my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Daley.
No report, thank you.
All right, going to the other end, Councilmember Flaherty,
No report, thanks.
Councilmember Ruff,
No report, thank you.
and Councilmember Rollo.
No report.
All right, and I will just briefly, with the state of our democratic republic in the face of the federal government and state government challenges to democracy, I just cannot give up the opportunity to just say a few words. And I was looking at my Constitution today, and the first article in the Bill of Rights says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or of abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So, I mean, there are many parts of the Constitution that the Trump administration has violated, but just tonight focusing on this freedom of the press, it has been truly shocking how President Trump has used his power to sue members of the press, communications outlets, CBS News, ABC News, the BBC now as well. Any news outlet that reports things that he doesn't like, whether they are factual, does not make any difference to him. He has gone after them, and I think it's atrocious, and it violates the Constitution. And I just wanted to say that. I don't need to dwell on it, but I just cannot resist to point out the many ways in which I fear for the democracy in this country. And as an elected representative, we also have sworn to uphold the Constitution of the state of Indiana and the United States. And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to speak out against violations at the highest levels of government. So we shall now move on. We don't have any reports from the mayor, clerk, city offices. We don't have any official reports from council committees. We will move to reports from the public. So this is the first opportunity for public comment on items not on tonight's agenda. So if anybody has such a comment, they can approach the podium, and please write your name very legibly, and then state your name, and you'll have up to 3 minutes. And if you're on Zoom, you can use the raise hand function, and we will get to you as well.
Good evening, Madam President. Seems like old times. This is Christopher Imge from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, first of all. I wanted to talk, I think, a couple weeks ago, and the timing wasn't quite with the passing of Charlotte Zelo, but we had our Future Cast luncheon a few weeks ago where the Chamber hosted with the Rotary Club and the Kelley School of Business. Bloomington's at a crossroads economically is what I got from that. Data from the Indiana Business Research Center, Kelley School, shows wages in the U.S. grew a healthy 3.7% in 2025, while Indiana wages grew 5.6%. But according to Professor Phil Powell, wages in Bloomington fell 6.2%. As we rely more on local income tax, that should be alarming to all of us. This was driven, not surprisingly, by cuts and hiring freezes at Indiana University. Specifically, academia's wages dropped 18%. Employment, while it grew in the state and nation, it fell 2% here. When an institution this size pulls back, there is impact. There's impact on retailers, restaurants, housing market. We all sort of feel that crunch, consumer spending falls. But the challenge, I think, presents an opportunity for us to sort of rebalance our economy toward sort of a broader private sector balanced approach. Since despite the issues with academia, we've seen private business are proving resilient here in our community. Specifically, small business creation rose 3% last year. That's more than 3 times the national rate. That's advanced manufacturing, life science, hospitality, tourism, creative technology, and media. And that lends us to, much like Technology Week that Councilmember Sari mentioned, we have the Trades District that exemplifies this sort of growth. Entrepreneurs, private investors, and of course, university talent collaborate to drive real innovation, real new jobs. So I'm urging the council to make investments in this private enterprise, specifically streamline local regulation and permitting for small businesses. Convoluted permitting and all of that just makes things cumbersome. So we want to sort of support public-private partnerships. Bloomington's economic future depends on not one institution alone, but a broad range of them. So our real strength lies in private business. The other thing I wanted to mention, since I have 30 seconds, is the Planning Commission met a couple weeks ago on housing incentives, and there was some debate there. If you've not watched that, I'm going to recommend it. But we've got to rethink on our housing incentives, specifically looking at the payment in lieu instead of having sort of specific units that are at a specific rate on the compliance and administrative cost it takes to do that. I welcome further conversations later on that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And just to clarify, I'm still Council Vice President. I just happen to be chairing this meeting. Thank you. Do we have anybody on Zoom? No hands raised on Zoom. Is there anybody else in council chambers who would like to give comment on items that are not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will go to appointments to boards and commissions. Do I have a motion?
On behalf of Interview Committee Team C, I move that Joseph Shing be appointed to seat C2 for the commission. That's what we're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Someone looked confused. For the Commission on the Status of Children and Youth, and Zachary Ammerman to the Commission on Sustainability for seat C5.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to make those appointments to the Commission on Status of Children and Youth and Commission on Sustainability. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We thank them for their service, and thank you to Team C for bringing those forward. Next, we will move to legislation for first reading.
I move that ordinance 2025-19 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
All right, all in favor of having this introduced and read by title and synopsis only, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Yes.
Ordinance 2025-19 to amend Title 15 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Vehicles and Traffic. The synopsis is Ordinance 2025-19 updates the maximum charges authorized towing services may collect when performing city-initiated tows to reflect more accurately the costs associated with towing services and current market pricing.
Thank you.
I move that ordinance 2025-20 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2025-20 to amend Chapter 4.32 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Non-Consensual Towing Business regarding updating towing license requirements and permissible towing and storage fees for non-consensual towing services under Chapter 4.32. The synopsis is Ordinance 2025-20 updates the maximum fees authorized towing services may charge when performing non-consensual towing and imposes additional requirements for licensing and operation of towing companies within the city's jurisdiction.
Thank you.
I move that ordinance 2025-44 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Yes. Ordinance 2025-44 to amend Title 10 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Wastewater, Septic Hauler Rate Adjustment. The synopsis is this ordinance amends the rates and charges in Title 10 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Wastewater to reflect increased costs of treating hauled wastewater to the Dillman Wastewater Treatment Plant.
Thank you.
I move that appropriation ordinance 2025-14 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Appropriation Ordinance 2025-14 to specially appropriate from the General Fund, Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, CC Jack Hopkins Fund expenditures not otherwise appropriated, appropriating various transfers of funds within the General Fund, Parks and Recreational General Fund, Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, Local Road and Street Fund, Public Safety Local Income Tax Fund, Solid Waste Fund, and Fleet Maintenance Fund. And the synopsis is, this ordinance appropriates various transfers of funds within the General Fund, Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, Local Road and Street Fund, Parks and Recreation General Fund, Public Safety Lit Fund, CC Jack Hopkins Fund, Solid Waste Fund, and Fleet Maintenance Fund.
Thank you. And those 4 items of legislation will be discussed and possibly voted on December 3rd. Next, we'll move to legislation for second reading and resolutions.
I move that resolution 2025-20 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Will the clerk please read?
Resolution number 2025-20 to fund emergency food services with a distribution from the Jack Hopkins Social Services Grant Program. The synopsis is this resolution, sponsored by Councilmember Asari, distributes funds from the Jack Hopkins Social Services Grant Program to Hoosier Hills Food Bank of Bloomington, Indiana, for emergency food services.
Thank you.
I move that Resolution 2025-20 be adopted.
Second.
All right, Councilmember Asare, would you like to introduce this item for us?
Sure. Just very briefly and for the benefit of the public, 2 weeks ago, in light of the ongoing government shutdown, Council sent a letter to the mayor requesting an additional appropriation from the Jack Hopkins Fund that we might distribute to organizations working in food security. The Jack Hopkins Fund is money that we set aside within the budget every single year for Council to specifically deal with emergent social issues. And so this felt like an appropriate use. That letter, all of us signed, sent to the mayor, and so we're now accompanying that with a resolution authorizing the release of those funds. I believe the amount, I should have known off the top of my head, is roughly half of what's still available. We wanted to make sure we still had a little bit of flexible money left in this fund, either for future years or other emergencies, and also sort of reflecting the fact that that the government shutdown has ended. But happy to take any questions. I guess the last clarification that's worth making is that we, following suit of CDBG, have suggested that this money, well, not suggested, are appointing this money to Hoosier Hills Food Bank. They have a network of other agencies that they work with, and it's fairly, unrestricted in terms of how they use it, only so far restricted that they need to use it to help people who need food. I think that's everything. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Councilmember Asare? I do have one question. So in the funding agreement, under funding requirements number 2, it says subrecipients who provide services related to reducing homelessness must, 1, participate in a coordinated service delivery system, and 2, require residency in Bloomington's Housing and Urban Development Service area. So this seems to reflect the mayor's stated priority that we, with city funds, we prioritize, or well, we as a community prioritize helping people who are from Bloomington or Monroe County and not people from elsewhere. And so I really wonder which actually Heading Home originally supported, but more recently is not supporting. So I wonder why the residency requirement in particular is in here.
I think that's a fair point, and Attorney Lehner, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, the MOU as it exists is a reflection of the MOUs that we've been using throughout the Jack Hopkins process, so might have just been a slight oversight. The committee had made it a stated purpose that those organizations that are funded, which is somewhat irrelevant for this particular transaction, but that the organizations that we fund that are working in homelessness, that they needed to abide by the Heading Home plan. This was, I think, something that we've sort of done over the last 2 years. So I think that's just a vestige of that. But I think I have no issue amending that if that needs to be amended. But I also don't think in this particular case it might be somewhat moot.
I just think that's a policy issue that should be investigated and not forgotten. I mean, I'm not
Agreed.
prepared to bring an amendment. I don't think it's, that vital in this case. But that basically, and I don't even know if Wheeler Mission, for example, is an entity that does not screen for where somebody is from.
Right.
And I don't know if they ever receive food from Hoosier Hills. It may be a totally moot point.
Right.
But I don't want to forget that that is a policy choice, and actually
Agreed.
Heading Home has kind of shifted their opinion on that.
Agreed. Thank you for bringing that up.
Council Attorney Lehner?
I can speak to this briefly. This is not an issue within the Jack Hopkins program. In the interest of time, and given the fact that this is an emergency, council staff used the MOU that CFRD was using with Hoosier Hills Food Bank. to streamline the process and make it more acceptable and easier for Hoosier Hills Food Bank. So this is the only situation that I'm aware of where this language would be a part of a distribution by council. It's not in the Jack Hopkins typical funding agreement, for example.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on Resolution 2025-20, an emergency grant for food security from the Jack Hopkins Fund? Do we have anybody online who is raising a hand? All right. Well, we will come back to council for comments. Any council members care to comment prior to the vote? Councilmember Zulik.
Yes, thank you. All I want to say is this is something I'm really proud to vote for, and am thankful to my colleague and friend, Councilmember Asare, for making it happen. So thank you.
Any other comments? Councilmember Daley.
Thank you. I just want to also second that thank you very much to Councilmember Asare. I'm really glad that you thought of this. This is every little bit helps. And just to reiterate, what we learned at our community conversation, I think most food assistance organizations agree that what they need most of all is consistent and reliable donations, whether it's funding or food, but something that they know every month that they can rely on. So as a side note, yes, I'm so proud to vote for this, but also let's all maybe kind of keep remembering that we can also contribute and keep doing more on a regular, reliable basis. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just add my thanks to Councilmember Asare, and, I'm sorry, should have gone to you first. That's all I wanted to say. Go ahead, Councilmember Asare.
I would just note tonight, and hopefully speaking on all of our behalf, I think that we're not trying to virtue signal here by it's a fairly small amount of money, realistically, given the need, and the need that this community that is sort of asking from us is something more like 1% of what we pay on public safety. And so I do think that as we're thinking about outcome-based budgeting in the year ahead and years following, that I hope that we can make food security one of the many things that we really focus on, and that we can create some solid outcomes that we might tie budget to in more significant ways moving forward.
All right, any other comments? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll on Resolution 2025-20?
Councilmember Flaherty?
Yes.
Ruff? Yes. Rallo?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Daley?
Yes.
Zulik?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
And Asari?
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, that resolution is adopted.
I move that ordinance 2025-45 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All right, all in favor of introduction, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2025-45 to fix the salaries of all elected city officials for the city of Bloomington for the year 2026. The synopsis is, this ordinance sets the maximum 2026 salary rate for all elected city officials for the city of Bloomington.
Oh, sorry. I move that ordinance 2025-45 be adopted.
Second.
All right. I don't know that we have a presentation on this. This was vetted by the fiscal committee, the special fiscal committee of the Common Council, and it reflects a 2.7% cost of living increase for all of the elected officials of the city of Bloomington, the mayor, the clerk, and the council members. Don't know what else there is to say, so are there any questions? Seeing none, is there any member of the public who would like to comment on ordinance 2025-45, fixing the salaries of elected officials for next year?
Good evening, Madam Vice President. Christopher Entry from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. I just want to take this time to thank all of our elected officials for taking the time to run for office, spend countless hours to try to improve this community. It doesn't go unnoticed, and I do want to put my sort of kudos to all of you here. Clerk Bolden's not here today, the mayor's not here, but it does mean a lot to have people who are committed to public service running for office. So thank you for your service to the community. It's appreciated.
Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to comment? No? And nobody else here in chambers? I don't think. So we'll come back. Any final comments from council members before we vote? Yes, Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. I have no opposition to cost of living adjustments as a general principle to apply to salaries, but my feeling has been consistent with the mayor recommended last year that when we think about elected official salaries, we should be rooting it first and foremost in a cohesive and consistent and comprehensive framework for city government. I don't think this proposal reflects that. In particular, I think while there are differences in what elected public service entails relative to civil city staff, say that the investments the city made over the last several years in an updated compensation scheme with sort of criteria to use to guide the importance of a role, the seriousness of the decision-making involved, the hours required, and things like that, that we should really be using that as the basis of like a values-informed decision about elected official compensation. We had a lot more robust discussion last year, and I think entering into that, it was clear that peer benchmarking is a priority for some folks, which is a perfectly fine filter, I think, to run a conclusion through and to potentially like moderate or interpret a conclusion that's rooted in our compensation framework. But I don't think a mere COLA on existing salaries alone without it being rooted in that framework is a proposal I can support. So I'll continue to support an approach where we actually root it in the city's compensation framework and a set of values rather than adjusting prior year salaries alone or simply looking at peer benchmarking, which I think is inadequate and kind of a disservice to what we pay elected officials generally. Not myself, I could sort of care less personally, but I think for the whole system and what we're trying to encourage with respect to who runs for office, are we paying them fairly, et cetera. So for those reasons, I'll be voting no this year, but maybe we'll think about it next year. Thanks.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none, will the deputy clerk please call the roll on ordinance 2025-45?
Councilmember Ruff.
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Daly.
Yes.
Zulik.
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
No.
Asari.
Yes.
And Flaherty.
Nope.
Thank you.
That ordinance is adopted with a vote of 6-2. We'll move on to the next item.
I move that ordinance 2025-41 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2025-41 to amend Title 20, the Unified Development Ordinance of the Bloomington Municipal Code regarding use table amendment, single room occupancy. The synopsis is this amendment modifies Table 03-1, allowed use table, use specific standards, as well as several definitions within the Unified Development Ordinance to allow for the use single room occupancy as directed through Council Resolution 2024-25. This ordinance is in accordance with Indiana Code 36-7-4-600.
I move ordinance 2025-41 be adopted.
Second.
All right. We have Mr. Gerlich from Planning and Transportation here to present. Please come on up.
Thank you. Eric Grulich, Development Services Manager. So as kind of prefaced here, this is a response to a council resolution directing us to investigate changes to the Unified Development Ordinance regarding the use of residential rooming house to incorporate potential new use, single room occupancy, paying attention to various items that were outlined in that resolution. Some of those were making this an allowed use in some capacity in multiple zoning districts, removing the owner occupancy restriction, and looking at ways that we can promote this use within the community and allow this in lots of different locations and zoning districts. So one of our challenges, so first I guess let me just kind of say, we have the use residential rooming house that is in the zoning code now. It is a permitted use in the multifamily districts with some use-specific limitations. It's also a permitted use in all of the mixed-use districts. And so the residential rooming house is characterized as a building that has a common kitchen, common bathroom, and then multiple sleeping areas. And so we have only had real one development that has come in and construct a single room occupancy use. That is at the location of 14th and College, just south of the CVS. There are 3 buildings that were built several years ago that function under this ordinance allowance, but we haven't seen many of these come forward. So as we were working through the council resolution and looking at ways to allow this in residential districts, which was one of the purposes of the ordinance itself, one of the things, and I've mentioned this several times, is we always have to look at things with a very cautious eye and be careful that we're not opening a door for something else that we don't want. And as is the challenge with many things regarding dwelling units and occupancy, that's something that the Unified Development Ordinance regulates very heavily and very purposefully to make sure that the number of occupants in a building are controlled based on the Unified Development Ordinance requirements. The reason for that are obviously linked to impacts on adjacent properties. The more people in a building, oftentimes more coming and going, more trash, more noise, etc. So that's why occupancy is limited and regulated to a very high regard. So one of our concerns with this was making sure that we're not just enabling a situation where landlords or other owners are just getting more people in a building and not accomplishing what we're looking for. What we're looking for, what the hope is buildings that have low rent based on, the low need for what they're actually renting. They're just renting a bedroom and they're sharing common spaces. And so in situations, when you look at other communities and the use of single room occupancy, they're looking at large buildings, situations where you're reusing a hotel, for instance, or situations where you have large buildings. So as we went through this process of looking at what changes we can incorporate, looking at other zoning codes throughout the nation and the community, we see this use in mixed-use commercial districts all the time, but we did not find regulations within other communities to allow this within single-family districts. And so that's where it really became challenging. And so as we went through conversations with the Planning Commission, this went to 2 hearings at the Planning Commission, and we heard lots of comments from neighbors and members of the community. That was certainly a concern that was echoed numerous times, is making sure that this is not just a path to get more renters within rental units. And so one of the prevailing comments that we heard was certainly the desire to try to incorporate certain confines and restrictions to kind of prevent that. So the owner occupancy component for the single family district came up a lot of times. We looked at certain aspects like limiting it to a nonprofit. Legal department was very concerned about stating who can own a property. So this was, as we looked through other communities, this was certainly something that we ran into a lot, were restriction that it has to be operated by a non-for-profit, which is certainly fine, but we can't control who owns a property. So we kind of ran into that hurdle a little bit. So while we recognize that one of the purposeful statements of the resolution from the council was to remove the owner occupancy, what we're bringing forward and what is before you today does include that as a use-specific standard as part of that use being allowed in the single-family districts, that being the R1, R2, R3, and R4 districts. So we went back and forth during the Plan Commission hearings on a couple different aspects of this. One of those was the number of bedrooms that were in each unit, and then also the number of occupants that were allowed in each unit. So at the first hearing that this went to the Plan Commission, we did have an occupancy limitation of 1 person proposed per unit, but then we had a higher bedroom count that was allowed and an owner occupancy. There were a lot of concerns that were raised about the number of bedrooms that were in there, and so we did scale that back to the 3 bedrooms. In regards to the number of occupants that are allowed per building, again, we kind of went back and forth on that. One of the things that we certainly wanted to try to accomplish, the hope of this was, you allow for couples or a family or some situation like that that allows for more than 1 person to occupy a unit or a bedroom, I should say. And so that's why our proposal currently has occupancy of 2 people per bedroom. We are not regulating children. Legal department advised against that. So, we are not regulating number of children, only adults. And so what we have brought forward to try to balance what we heard coming from Plan Commission hearings as well as members of the public is a proposal to modify the use residential rooming house to rename that single room occupancy. We are proposing to allow it as a conditional use with use-specific standards in the R1, R2, R3, and R4 district, as a permitted use with those same use-specific standards within the RM and RH, and then permitted uses within all of the mixed-use districts, with the exception of the mixed-use institutional district. So real quick, I'll just kind of go through some of those use-specific standards that I mentioned in the R1 through R4. There's a maximum of 3 bedrooms that are allowed. In an SRO, there are no limitations on number of bedrooms in any other districts. There is a limit of 2 adults per bedroom, which I discussed. The reason for that was to allow for couples or families to some capacity to occupy these buildings. We included a use-specific standard similar to the duplexes, where there is a buffer that has created a 150-foot buffer that exists for 2 years. We included the language that a property owner cannot have any notices of violation. We included the similar language for the SROs if you're constructing a new one, that they be compatible to surrounding structures in regards to roof pitch, front porch width and depth, access, so the same kind of standards that we see with duplexes. And then, as I mentioned, one of the things that seemed to be very important to the members of the community and certainly the Plan Commission was including the owner occupancy allowance or requirement, I should say, within the R1, R2, R3, and R4. And the main reason for that was it ensures that the owner lives there, which takes away, the high rental capability or possibility of, one person just establishing SROs all over the city for the simple purpose of getting more occupants, and they're not really accomplishing what we were hoping for. So we were, bound a little bit by what we can legally allow or not allow. We can certainly allow or require that the owner live there. So that was just one attempt to try to ensure that, this doesn't become just a proliferation for more rentals with higher occupancy allowances and not really accomplishing what the council was hoping to see with this resolution. So with this, there are several other changes kind of running throughout the Unified Development Ordinance of removing the references to residential rooming house, replacing that with single room occupancy. But beyond that, the main meat of it is certainly in the use specific standards and then the allowed use table changes that we are proposing. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to move Amendment 1 because it just clarifies some things. It doesn't change anything substantive. So to avoid talking about everything twice, I'd like to go ahead and move Amendment 1. And can I give this to you, Councilmember Daley, because I'm the sponsor of that amendment?
Are you moving second? Are you
Yes, I move Amendment 1.
second?
Thank you. Okay, so Amendment 1 is to add a whereas clause to clarify that it is the City Council that is asking the planning staff and the Plan Commission to consider single-room occupancy buildings. And then it attaches a new attachment A that is more clear than the previous attachment A. It has some redlining instead of just boldface. It corrects a couple of typos. And then it does make clear that the definition between residential rooming house and single-room occupancy, that definition did change. That was not clear with the attachment A previously. So that's what this amendment does.
All right, thank you very much, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. Any questions on Amendment 1? All right, I don't see any, so now we can move to public comment on Amendment 1 only, not the entire ordinance. Do we have anybody in the council chambers or on Zoom who would like to make public comment on Amendment 1 only? I don't see any movement here. Anybody online? All right. All right, so then we will move on. Any comments? Council member comments on Amendment 1? You guys are easy. All right, let's move for a vote. Can we do a voice vote on this, or do we need to do a roll call vote? I don't remember. All right. Deputy Clerk McDowell, would you mind? Yes, thank you.
Yes. Excuse me, Councilmember Rallo. Rallo?
Oh, sorry, I thought you said rough. Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Daley?
Yes.
Zulik?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Asari?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
And Ruff.
Yes.
Thanks.
Super. That passes 8-0. And I will pass the gavel back to you. Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you. So I think we can take questions for Mr. Grulich on the ordinance at this point, because we just have this slightly amended, more clear version in front of us. And then, of course, we do have another amendment, which I do intend to get to as well. So, but let's see if there are any questions first. Councilmember Asari?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Grulich. Two quick questions. Could you talk a little bit more about that buffer zone, explain the reasoning behind it, and also for the benefit of both me and the public, like how exactly does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was an attempt to try to make sure there's not a proliferation, I guess. A lot of these are just to appease concerns of a saturation of one particular area that might have this use more than other portions of the city. So as part of the conditional use approval, a 150-foot buffer is created around this property that no other SROs are allowed within a 2-year time period.
So that there can't be two SROs next to each other within a 2-year time period of one being established?
There has to be at least a 150-foot buffer before another one could be established within that 2-year time period.
But after 2 years, you could have another?
Correct.
Okay, but that's only within R1 through 4?
Correct. So that's specific to the conditional use aspect.
Okay, so, okay, fantastic. And then the second one is about the parking spaces. Just, can you help me understand the change that we're making? So it's 2 spaces for the unit and then 1 per bedroom? Is that a change or is that just a clarification?
So yeah, so that's not a change from the current maximum. It's just a renaming of changing from guest room to bedroom.
Okay, it was just the rename.
And so it's
okay.
just a maximum. So, within the R1, R2, and R3, and R4, 9 times out of 10, you're just allowed a singular driveway. So we're really not getting into a situation of delineating how many cars are in a driveway. This would really only kind of come into play if there were spaces that were being created off of an alley, for instance.
But I guess.
But the parking maximum would apply for every other district. So in the single family, you're controlled by a driveway width. So the parking maximum is really just going to come into play in mixed use districts where you're not constrained.
And just to make sure, it's a parking maximum, not a parking minimum?
Correct. There's not a minimum.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from council members? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you. Do these units have to be attached?
They don't have to be in the mixed-use districts. In the single-family districts, it does only allow for 1 dwelling unit to meet that definition. So in the single-family, in the R1, R2, and R3, you could only have 1 building as a dwelling unit. You could have a duplex, if there was some other use, well, I guess not in a duplex because you wouldn't have that 150-foot separation. But in the single-family districts, it would just be 1 building, yeah.
And by single-family districts, do you mean our districts that have small apartment buildings up to like 30 units and condos up to 30 units? Is that sort of like what you're referring to? Like Prospect Hill I live in a 32-unit condo building, but are you calling that a single-family?
No. So in the single-family districts, what I mean specifically is the R1, R2, R3, or R4.
Oh, I live in one of those, yes. There is a condo that was built in the 90s with 32 units. So it's just, I think it's confusing to refer to it as single-family.
Sure.
Where we have very different housing types in all of our neighborhoods. They're just not allowed now. Okay, so I have a single-family home, and I could attach 2 more units to it? Is that what this is saying?
Well, so that would be a triplex, if I'm understanding what you're describing. That would be a triplex, which would only be an allowed use in the R4 district.
Okay, so we're trying to make 3 affordable units, but in some case, if an owner has to live there, then we would only be making 2 potentially new affordable units for people who don't own the property.
Well, so there would still be only 1 unit. You could have bedrooms, so that's I think an important character or difference.
Okay.
Is there's only 1 dwelling unit, so 1 kitchen, and then you can have 3 bedrooms.
Well, I guess I was thinking of it as they're different rentals, right? So you would be renting a room.
Correct, yes.
So we would only be creating 2 new rentals per SRO in R1 to R4.
Yes.
So something very small. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Councilmember Rallo.
Thank you. So this is a housing form that's meant for affordability. It is, and I imagine that we have some kind of range of rent in mind. Do you happen to have that range?
Yeah, so again, that was something that we discussed with the legal department, and so rent control or rent restrictions are not something that we can impose by right, as an incentive, so that's how we accomplish that with the incentive section and say, you can have certain amount extra units that have to be within a certain AMI, but those are an incentive, so it's not a requirement.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about a scale range of affordability. Is that at all been discussed? What would this potentially offer?
Yeah, so that's a challenging question.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you're aware of, how to, the dream, when you see these operated in a lot of communities in larger buildings, they're operated by a non-for-profit or by a municipality with a very purposeful goal of creating these affordable units. So they're set out to control the rent by the property owner. Not by the municipality themselves. And so that's where it just legally becoming very challenging for us to try to accomplish what you see. You know, when you think of an SRO, you know, instinctively you think that yes, oftentimes these are very affordable because you're renting a very small area, but they don't have to be. You know, some owner could charge whatever they want, and that's our challenge here in Bloomington a lot, as rental units are very price matched or restricted with what the maximum value in rent and profit that the owner can get. And so, you know, you have to come into it purposely saying, I am going to offer these with a lower rent with that set in mind. But we can't regulate or require that.
So these could possibly be affordable, but possibly not.
They could be if the owner chooses that.
Yeah. So I wondered about the existing ones, the existing residential rooming houses. So there's one, I think, at Eagleson and Atwater.
Yeah, so there are a few grandfathered rooming houses that are kind of scattered around the 3rd Street and Atwater area. I don't know what the rents are of those.
Well, I was going to ask, is it, what are those considered now? Are those considered
Rooming houses?
So the grandfather's rooming houses are not considered our SROs?
No, they came in when rooming houses were allowed in a previous code, so the owner doesn't live there, so they don't meet our current, so it's a legal non-conforming use.
Okay. Okay, I think that's good for now. Thank you.
Any other first-round questions? Councilmember Ruff.
So you mentioned a minute ago the owner living there. Can you kind of compare the requirement for an ADU and the owner being required to either live in the ADU unit or the main unit? And can you sort of compare, are we talking, what are the differences in similarities with what we're talking about here with SROs?
Yeah, so same situation. You know, the language for the accessory dwelling units requires the owner to live on the property, whether it's in the main dwelling unit or the ADU. Either one of those have to be owner occupied. So that is ensured through, you know, making sure that they claim that property on their homestead exemption form. So that's how we ensure that the owner lives there and is claiming that and can only be claiming that one property.
So you don't see any like obvious sort of loopholes or ways sort of to get around that requirement?
Well, so yeah, so there is, you know, certainly, and this is something that we do. I don't know how often it happens because we're not involved with the recording of deeds, but we do have had conversations where an owner has said, well, if I put my kid's name on the deed, does that mean that they live there? And it's like, as long as they are claiming that and no one else is claiming that property as their homestead exemption, then yes, you could put a child on your deed and they would be the owner there. And so that would be an allowance for, I don't want to say a loophole, but something to that effect. And so that was a challenge. That was a reality. And, you know, there weren't enough, I guess, safeguards that we could put in here. You know, I think the council is certainly probably aware of what we're trying to ensure, but also make sure it doesn't get abused. And so this was a very challenging set of rules and regulations to try to incorporate within the R1, R2, and R3, and R4 districts.
Okay, thank you.
Any other first-round questions? If not, we'll go to Councilmember Sare.
Okay, so within R1 and R4, the difference here, like what we're making a conditional use, is that somebody who currently occupies a home can say, you know what, I'd like to rent out the rooms in the rest of my house that I'm currently occupying. That is the only change that we're making in R1 through R4.
Yes, by adding, so right now the UDO in terms of the uses does not allow for residential rooming houses in the R1, R2, R3, and R4. So this would be allowing that as a conditional use. So we propose it as a conditional use so that there is a public process that neighbors can be involved with. So it does have a little bit higher level of transparency with it.
Is there any other change happening in R1 through R4?
Not really, I mean, other than allowing this use, but then with the use-specific standards that come with it.
Right, but I'm saying, like, when you're thinking about the archetypes of things that could happen here, there's, outside of that example, is there any other example that creates more housing shelter is maybe a better way of describing it, but is there like housing in the residential areas?
No, not specifically,
Okay,
and yeah, for some of the reasons that I mentioned of, how to balance, occupants and number of people and number of bedrooms and
then on that note, the sub-point, I think it's B, I'm sorry, that says that no room should be rented for less than 30 consecutive days. How does that interact with Airbnbs, those type of things?
Yeah, so the main distinction there is to differentiate this kind of from a hotel. Hotels, you check in, check out, whatever. So this is ensuring a higher level of occupancy than you're just staying the night and then you're moving on. Yeah.
Councilmember Rosenbarger?
Can I piggyback on that Airbnb question? Because right now, I can rent the second room, like say I have a house with a second room, I can rent that by the night.
Correct.
On Airbnb.
Yes, we do not have any regulations right now for Airbnbs.
Because we don't think that we can with the state, and I can still do that. I mean, after this, I can still do that. And it's different. I am also a little confused of how this is different than me renting a room in my house for a month at a time. Is it the number of people?
Yeah, so this would be really the smallest difference is you would be allowed 2 people per bedroom.
Right, okay, and so that is an amendment that may be introduced later tonight, that there is a different limit. Okay, so mostly the difference is you could have two people potentially with children in a bedroom. Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Councilmember Ruff?
A minute ago, you mentioned the involvement or the opportunity for involvement of the residents, the area, the neighborhood, the community in the process. And I just want to get clarification. My understanding, based on talking to our staff, is that all SRO conditional use petitions would go to the BZA. There's no staff level. There's no situation in at least R1 or R4 where it'd be a staff level improvement. It would go to the BZA to be.
Yeah, it could go either to the Board of Zoning Appeals or the hearing officer, but both of those require public notification, letters, signs, ads, and a public hearing.
So what determines in a given case whether it would go to the hearing officer or the BZA?
So typically, we take things to the hearing officer that we're recommending approval of, that nobody is speaking out against, that don't seem to have any real issues, no remonstrators against, things that maybe there is a little bit more public input that has been received. Maybe there's something that we do feel needs a higher level of transparency and viewing. We send those to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but that was not the understanding I came into the meeting with. I came into the meeting with the understanding that it just goes to the BZA, no matter what.
So duplexes, for instance, was specifically written in that they have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We did not include that language with the SRO use-specific limitations. So there is a possibility it could go to the hearing officer.
Yeah, I thought it was like the duplex situation.
Yeah, so plexes, duplexes as conditional uses, those have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. That was something that was very specifically written in to those provisions.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Rosenbarger?
Sorry, yes, I have another one. I want to talk about this in relation to triplexes. So my question is going to be, why the owner occupancy, but I want to first just like say something about it. I think the owner occupancy does kind of, I mean, I'm going to vote yes on this, but I think the owner occupancy like misses the purpose of an SRO, because I think the vision is a place for, people to live kind of in their own space and in a shared space, and not necessarily in someone else's space too. So I think it is meant to be more of a co-op situation, and I know co-ops are allowed, so that's okay, but I think this instead is going to kind of have a problem of like using single-family homes for SROs instead of potentially like new development as SROs, sort of more similar to triplexes. So that was like my vision of it, I guess. But why then the owner occupancy? Is it just because comments at?
Well, so that was to help curtail a proliferation of these by one particular person or landlord who just has a lot of rentals and say, well, I'm gonna go get an SRO at every single one of my rentals, and now I've just got 6 people where I can only have 3.
Other council member questions? I think if we have another amendment, that could come forward at this point. Oh, yes, Councilmember Ruff.
I'd just like to follow up on my last question with our council attorney administrator. Are you in agreement with that interpretation that staff makes a decision about whether an SRO proposal goes to the BZA or is it just heard by the hearing officer?
I thought, with respect to the conditional uses, that it went to the BZA. Eric, I'm looking for that site right now.
Yeah, so the UDO, in terms of processes, it outlines a path for the hearing officer and says what they can and cannot hear, so they can hear variances from development standards as well as conditional uses. The UDO is not specific of, staff can determine based on criteria X, Y, and Z, the criteria that I mentioned. It's just what we use as an internal guideline. For something like this, we're probably going to err more times than not on being more conservative and sending it to the Board of Zoning Appeals. If there were situations, and we kind of dealt with this a little bit with accessory dwelling units. When those first came out in the UDO, we were sending every single one of those to the BZA. As we kind of went down the line and, we got more comfortable with dealing with it. If there were specific situations, we might send it to BZA, but as it became a little bit more standard, we were sending those to the hearing officer just to make things a little bit easier on members of the public that were trying to do them. Oftentimes going to the Board of Zoning Appeals can seem very heavy to members of the public. They have to be up on TV in front of a board and city council chambers, and that can feel very imposing. And sometimes that was a restriction for folks. And so, with ADUs, as we went down the line, like I said, sometimes we would send those to the hearing officer, but starting off, we were certainly being very conservative and sending most of those, or all of those, to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So I would expect that, if these start to come forward, we would be sending the majority of these, if not all of them, to the BZA for a while. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? Or we can go to the amendment, the second amendment.
I'd like to move Amendment 2 to Ordinance 2025-41.
Second.
All right, Councilmember Rollo, please present your amendment.
Yes, this is fairly simple. It changes the occupancy from 2 adults to 1 in an SRO unit. You might put it up. Could we put the language up so people can see the strikeout and the addition? So I have 2 reasons for the amendment. One is concern about overcrowding of the unit. I don't see a single room as adequate for families. So having a single adult is one way to encourage the occupancy of an individual. It doesn't preclude children, but it is more likely to be occupied by an individual. So it's really it's a means for health and safety of the residents of the SRO. The second reason is evolves from what Councilmember Ruff mentioned in his inquiry, which is the possibility, and I can imagine, in fact, I've known single-family houses purchased with the child included in the title of the home. And so it's to prevent the circumvention of our over-occupancy code that limits single-family zones to 3 unrelated adults. It's also in alignment with HUD regulations, which limit SRO occupancy to 1 person per unit. And that's it.
Thank you. May I ask staff for their input on this amendment?
Yeah, so certainly that is an approach that the council could take, is limiting occupancy to 1 individual per room. The challenge with that is it really just kind of puts us back to literally exactly the situation where we're at now, where you can have 1 unit, 3 bedrooms, 1 person in a bed, and so we haven't really done anything. So that I'm just pointing out that would be the implication, obviously, of that amendment, but that would be for the council, obviously, to decide if that's something they want to pursue.
Thank you. Questions for Councilmember Rallo or for staff regarding the amendment? Councilmember Asari.
First, a question for staff. Mr. Grulich, is, in your opinion, given the concerns that Councilmember Rallo raised, are there other ways that one could design the policy to accomplish those things?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that was the challenge that we faced as well. When we first brought this at the first round at the Planning Commission, we had the occupancy at 1, but we had a higher bedroom count because one of the things that we took away from the resolution that came from the council is you want to allow this in the single-family districts, and you want to move the needle a little bit. You want to give an allowance for a little bit more than what current code allows for, and so we were challenged with how do we accomplish that. So right now, like I said, you can have 3 bedrooms, you can have 1 person in each, and that's what you get. So if we want to move that needle a little bit, we've got to move it somewhere. Whether that's the number of occupants per room or that's the number of bedrooms that's in a unit, one of those 2 things has to give. And so this was just simply our suggestion that the Planning Commission seemed amenable to, and members of the public seemed amenable to. So that's kind of how we got to where we are with that.
And do you see a contradiction with should this not pass, if with the over-occupancy regulations in the UDO, would we need to also adjust those to bring them into compliance
No, because the definition of this says that for individuals that don't meet the definition of family, and so that excludes this from that.
Excellent. And then my question for Councilmember Rallo, considerations of people being related. If 2 adults who are related in some way want to room together, are you concerned about that, or are you concerned about the proliferation of some other type of people using rooms together?
Well, what I'm concerned about is the potential for families to occupy, say, 5 individuals, 2 parents and 3 children or something, to occupy a single room. That's possible. Because we're not going to regulate children. So I think to err on the side of caution, we should limit it to 1. The other potential is that, I mean, I think we already have a problem with owner occupancy in our community, the availability of single-family homes. Airbnbs are taking them off the market. Private equity firms are purchasing them. We're adding another incentive here for the purchase of a home that's very lucrative, that then could essentially double the occupancy, charge rent, cover the mortgage payment. And I think that that is completely conceivable. If this was not a university town, it probably wouldn't matter. But that is the context we're living in right now. So.
I'd just like to follow up on Councilmember Asari's question, which I may have misunderstood, but was the question whether Councilmember Rallo would be opposed to a married couple defined as a family because they're married or whatever, occupying an SRO? Was that the question?
Yeah, I was trying to understand, I was just trying to understand if the concern, like in terms of the design here of the amendment, if the concern is, you know, if it's more on the side of you might have a family, which is a point he brought up, i.e. you might have 4 people living in an SRO, versus the concern being that you might have, for example, 2 students living in an SRO. And you know, yeah, so I mean, I can give comment later, but I was just trying to understand the, you know, what was the impetus of the design here.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, then, can I follow up with staff for a minute? So given our definition of family, are we allowed to limit a bedroom to 1 person? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused where the definition of family comes in. Because currently, if they are related adults, you can have unlimited number of them in a single-family home anyway. So I'm kind of wondering how this would be different.
Yep, great question. So in the definition of family, or I'm sorry, in the definition of residential rooming house that is changing to single room occupancy, you know, it states in there that the individuals that are occupying it do not meet the definition of family. And so that is in regards to just saying that the unit itself is regulated differently, and that everybody that is living there isn't related. And so it's acknowledging, it's calling that out as something different, that everybody is there is not meeting the definition of family because they're not all related, they're not all on the same lease. So that's the important distinction there. So in this case here, they're on individual leases or something different, and so that's the key characteristic of how that's different and how this is allowed for residential rooming houses to even exceed the number of occupants in mixed-use districts, where you can have, you know, 40 people in a dwelling unit because it's exempted because they're in different leases and they're just not subject to the definition of meeting a family.
So if we compare to a single-family home in an R3 district, for example, where you could have 12 people, if they're all related, you could have 12, potentially 12
Yep.
adults
Yep.
living in that home.
Yeah.
Let's say it has 4 bedrooms. You could, I mean, that
Because
would be a lot more people than you could have if you had an SRO because it's limited to 3 bedrooms, 2 in each bedroom.
And so that's an important characteristic of the Fair Housing Act that says, you know, you can't regulate how many family members, how many people you are related to or married to by blood or marriage or other legal adoption. You know, so the Fair Housing Act, you know, governs who you can and can't regulate to that capacity. So I don't know if Enadina is online or if council attorney wants to help speak to the Fair Housing Act in any regards more specifically, but that's an important distinction there of how families, everybody's related by blood, marriage, et cetera, and how that's allowed to be unregulated is because of the Fair Housing Act language and decisions.
But am I right in my example that you could have 12 adults in a single-family home? And that would be a higher density than this SRO proposal would allow in that same house?
Yes. So yes, you can have 12 people if it meets the definition of family, where they're not a lease because they all live there, they're all related by blood marriage, so they're a separate thing. And then you have a situation where you're not that. So the situation where you're not that and you're signing a lease and you're not all related, that's where you're restricted to 3. In a situation where you're not signing a lease and you're regulated separately as individuals, so you're not meeting the definition of family, so that's where you're allowed to have or not be subject to that 3,
Okay.
or 5, in the mixed-use districts.
Okay, Councilmember Asare?
Very quick follow-up, piggybacking on her follow-up to my follow-up, is if we pass this amendment, are we saying that a family could not occupy an SRO in R1 through 4?
So the family could, but not an adult. So you could have one adult and as many kids as you want.
But not two married adults.
No, so that was when this first came forward. There was language in there that said persons that meet the definition of family, or 3 unrelated, or
Right.
2 occupants or something like that. But that was contradictory. To have adults or family members, because then you're getting into that situation of you could have 14 people in there if they're all related, and that's not what we want. So we're calling this out differently and saying 2 adults, period, and then children are unregulated.
Okay.
Councilmember Zulik?
Councilmember Rallo, I understand the occupancy concern, but I'm a little bit concerned about separating families or just, 2 people who are together but not married by law. Would you consider, if we were to change this to 2 adults, a maximum of 2 adults and a maximum of 3 total people per bedroom? Would that be more?
I thought Mr. Gorelick, I'm sorry, we need your assistance here. Because what you're saying is 2 adults plus a child. And I don't think we can't restrict the number of children.
Correct. We would not be regulating them in any capacity.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So I had another question, may I? So I had another consideration, and that is that HUD specifies 1 person per unit in SROs. Would violating that make these SROs ineligible for HUD funding?
That is possible, but I think the HUD requirements or restrictions are just if you're getting funding for them. They don't, somebody can certainly, if this is just an allowance that you can have up to 2, if somebody, an individual, an organization was seeking HUD funding, they would just restrict it to 1 occupant per room, and then that would meet them. So we're not necessarily making them have 2 people. They would be choosing that. It's just an allowance.
But I'm anticipating that if this is a commercial endeavor, it is likely to be applying for assistance for HUD, for some kind of public assistance.
It could be, but that would obviously have to be the well-thought-out intentions of the organization. And so if they were saying, hey, we need this HUD funding, then they would bring forward that says, we are limiting occupancy to 1 individual per room.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions on the amendment? Councilmember Ruff?
Well, this is for anybody, staff or council or the sponsor. Do we have any information or understanding of why HUD limits to 1 person per room? I mean, there's obviously a reasoning behind it. Does anybody have any idea why?
I don't have a specific background on why that was. No.
Okay.
Other questions? Councilmember Asari?
I was trying to formulate the question, maybe more of a, it's somewhat of an open thing, but I'm trying to understand, and Councilmember Rallo, I'd love your thoughts on this too, the sort of balancing here between the owner having to live in the property to begin with in R1 through R4, and then the idea that there would be this huge proliferation, coming from both sides, right? Like, because I get the concern here. Like, I get the notion that you might have basically 3 very large families. Let's say 2 married and a bunch of kids in 3 different rooms. So you could have 12 people or something like that living in a small single-family house or something like that. I get the concern, but I'm trying to understand whether, the fact that we're requiring that the owner live there feels like enough of a barrier to me to that. So just your thoughts on, I'm just trying to wrap my head around, like, what are the appropriate barriers? What are the appropriate guardrails here for what we're trying to achieve?
Yes, there can be large families occupying a single-family home. I guess the context that I'm referring to is really one of living in a university town where we have it's been a greater and greater likelihood of families, parents who have money to purchase homes, purchase a home for their child, and then rent it out to others. This doubles the occupancy, so it makes it even more attractive to do that. So this is going to, I would assume, accelerate that process.
I have a question, I think, for staff. So SROs would be subject to residential rental occupancy permits through hand, right?
I don't think that they would, because these would be a boarding house, as I recall from conversing with them, and they don't inspect those, similar to hotels and motels.
That's not what I recall. I'm looking now. Title
Okay,
16.
yeah, I apologize. I had this written down a long time ago, and I forgot to recheck my notes on this. But that was my previous thought, was that they would not, but I might be mistaken. So I apologize for not having a clear answer on whether or not hand would inspect these.
Councilor Lehner, do you know whether these would be subject to hand inspection?
No, I don't.
Mr. Hiddle, would you happen to know, seeing Director Hiddle in the audience? What? What did he say? He does not know. Okay. Well, I will try to find out. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
I kind of think they wouldn't be. It's been a while since I've read our inspection program, but I think it exempts short-term, and that is anything under 30 days. But it's been a couple of years since I've read it.
But this SROs would have to be rented for at least 30 days or longer.
Correct. So they wouldn't be exempt, so they would
Right.
get inspected, yes. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, I
that's
think
what I'm
that.
thinking. The jurisdiction in Title 16 says, this residential rental unit and lodging establishment inspection program title shall apply to all residential rental units and lodging establishments located within the corporate boundaries of the city. That sounds to me like it would be included. Are there other questions? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
I think this is for staff. Did you all, I kind of see an either 6 people owner occupied or 1 person per rental bedroom, but I think both is too cumbersome. Did you all think about both of those? Also, another detail that I think about with, we think it's just lucrative for a landlord to rent out then every room. If we had like 2 per bedroom with no owner occupancy, there are cons to that, where right now, students or anyone rent in one single lease for the most part, where anyone is on the hook for, $3,000 a month, and that landlord can, if someone defaults, that landlord can go after everyone for $3,000 a month, right? Where like, if these are single room occupancies, it does change the risk for a landlord too if someone defaults, because they would be defaulting on their own bedroom. And it wouldn't be as big of a loss to them, and they couldn't recover as much. So like there are pros and cons, no matter what, I guess, to an owner living in it or not.
Yes.
Okay, but then, did you think about owner occupancy versus number per bedroom? Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was where I was, kind of at the onset trying to explain, all the various challenges of, how to add additional capacity, additional housing, additional sleeping areas, while trying to curtail and make sure that it doesn't just become a proliferation of more over occupancy or higher occupancy, I guess is probably a better word, for rental units everywhere. Because, yes, if there's not the owner occupancy, then anybody who owns multiple properties could, in theory, come along and get this for every single property that they have, which is not what we were trying to accomplish. And so the owner occupancy component was really the only way to make sure that it limits that to just that one unit. And yeah. And so that's just a challenge, and obviously all the members of the council are recognizing, I think, these challenges of how to try to get more housing and make it something different than what we've got right now without it just being a proliferation of more student rental uses and not necessarily what we were hoping to accomplish.
Can I keep going?
Yes.
I guess too, I want to ask, like, don't you agree that students are also cost burdened, and by alleviating rent levels for everyone, even if some people will, sure, take advantage of this kid on the deed and 6 students can live there. I'll tell you what, I would have loved to share a bedroom with any of my friends. I lived with my sister for 16 years and I was horrified to live alone. I was horrified, I was a baby. But like, this will help everyone by, even if there are 6 students living together, it should help in some way our housing supply.
It will certainly increase the ability to house more individuals. If you take off the owner occupancy and allow this to be everywhere, obviously, there's pros and cons of, what is the reality? Will it be, affordable that is less than market rate, or what is the maximum that you could possibly get from people that want to live there? 9 times out of 10, people are going to charge as much money as they can possibly get from it. And that's just our reality that we deal with here in Bloomington. Unless it is operated specifically by a non-for-profit that is getting funding, that has those restrictions that go along with it, that have the rent restrictions that they are imposing themselves, then you get the ideal situation, where you've got an SRO that is providing affordable rents, because that is something that is being forced, or not forced, a requirement of funding. With the rooming houses that are, that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation on 14th Street, I have the understanding that the rents there are very expensive, and because they can get it. The only situations where, you really have rents that are not that are the co-op houses, but that's a different business model.
Other questions on Amendment 2? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little confused. I mean, yes, people charge what they can within a market, but it's exactly that. It is a market. There are limits to that. Like, don't you agree that a 3,000 square foot home would sell for more than a 1,000 square foot home if all other attributes are fairly equal, right? Like, yes. similarly, what you're getting, if you're renting a whole house by yourself, or you're renting a bedroom, or you're sharing in the rental of a bedroom between two people, like regardless of whatever the market price is for those things, allowing two people to occupy a room instead of one, all else equal, does lead to lower rents, by which I'm defining as the rental amount that per capita we are paying. Right? Like, am I missing something?
Well, I mean, that's the idea, dream of supply and demand. But, like we said, we have not, from a reality standpoint, seen that.
Well, no, my question is much more basic, which is that if you take a given rental amount, whatever the market price is, and divide it by 2 versus dividing it by 1, is it not cheaper to divide it by 2? Like,
you're assuming that rent stayed the same and somebody didn't raise that rent knowing that they can get that times 6.
okay, so your assertion is that if we allow 2, the rental price will double relative to what it would be otherwise.
I think that's very likely. I mean, if I owned a piece of property and I knew that I could get more from a renter, then I would do that.
I question the market logic, but okay. I do have a follow-up for the sponsor as well, which is I've always been found a little bit paradoxical, like the arguments over the number of people in a house or a room, when we talk about putting pressure on the housing market, because there are a finite number of people who want to live here. And when we take 5-bedroom houses and limit them to 3 people, we are leaving bedrooms empty, and in fact creating spillover effects that affect other houses. and similarly, like when we add 1,000 or 2,000 new units of rental housing, like it's maybe expensive because it's new construction, but real people live there, and those are real people that would otherwise be trying to get housing within existing structures. So I guess I'm curious, like, does that, when we talk about limiting, I don't think this is going to blow up into some like big thing. I think this is incrementalism, but like let's assume there's 100 3-bedroom houses that do this over time. If it's single person occupancy, that's 300 people. If it's 2 and they all max that out, that's 600 people in the same exact number of units or homes. So it's housing 300 more people relative to what this amendment would allow, that are no longer competing against others for housing, I guess. I'm curious for what your perspective is on that, and like if you think, like maybe I'm missing something in your rationale, but I would think that actually allowing, yes, without overcrowding, but like a couple to live in a bedroom would help alleviate, if anything, pressures on the housing system.
Well, okay, there's a little bit to unpack there. Regarding supply and demand, we have approved thousands and thousands of apartments, and rents haven't noticeably decreased.
Well, to clarify, I'm not asking about price. I'm asking about availability, and that's it.
There's availability. There isn't full occupancy of these multifamily units that have been built, and but it's available, but apparently it hasn't affected the rents. So I think it's a faulty. I mean, it's a simplistic argument to say supply and demand is going to automatically result in a decrease in cost of units, but because it hasn't been shown to happen. I mean, you can't demonstrate that it has.
No, actually, in places like Minneapolis, it's been demonstrated that relative to alternatives. Oh, that's fine.
We're talking about here.
That's actually not the argument I'm making. My question was, don't you like? What do you disagree with about the fact that allowing 2 people would allow more people to live in a given number of housing units and therefore decrease the pressure on the availability of other housing units? Like, I'm not understanding. It seems to me like that argument would actually resonate with your concerns.
I'm not an expert, but HUD is, and HUD recommends, or actually stipulates, requires only 1 person per room, per unit. I see it as, potentially, and we have to think about potential scenarios, worst cases, of entire families occupying a room, is that Is that what we would like to see happen here? Because that is certainly a potential. In fact, I would think that might even be a likelihood that it would happen. So I don't want to incentivize that, first of all. And then secondly, I do know examples of houses, single-family houses, that have been purchased by well-heeled parents that have changed the title to their son or daughter, and this would further incentivize it, because now you can double the occupancy, and that seems very attractive for covering the mortgage for the time that the student is living in town. That does compete with housing, and it competes with single-family housing, which we happen to have in short supply. So, I mean, what we are doing here is circumventing our own over occupancy code. So if people want to do that, then this is a means to do that.
Could you give me a HUD citation also? I just wanted to look that up while we're talking about it.
Yeah, sent to me.
Feel free to email me, or
Sure.
or if there's an
It might
easy
take a few
citation to
minutes.
reference, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's it. Thanks.
Other questions on Amendment 2? Councilmember Asari.
Quick question for Mr. Grulich. The conditional use would be renewed yearly? You get it, once you have it forever, or?
Correct. It would run with the property forever.
And because there's a 2-year boundary around the likelihood that this creates this ginormous proliferation of, just SROs all over R1 and R2, R4. That would, if that happened, it would mean that all the people in R1 and R4 currently are going to sell their houses, go somewhere else outside of the city or in the city, be bought up by people in New York who then bring their kids here, move out of all of the student housing, then they occupy R1 and R4, right? Like that's what would have to happen, and it would have to happen in some type of beautiful sequence. Like all of the places within 150 meters of each other would have to do that in coordination, yes?
Well, I mean, there's obviously a lot of factors that would go into that. Each property owner would have to have a lot of offers for that to be enticing to sell their houses and move.
But my point is that the likelihood that we go from like 0 SROs to thousands of SROs is quite low. Would you agree?
It depends on which, if there's a huge cost benefit and there are people that are willing to buy those, then it's possible. If there was an organization that was like, hey, here's a money-making scheme immediately and we're ready to go.
But they all are going to be owners who are going to occupy. Okay, well, my question really is just about, will we have some early indicators? So assuming that we were to have, that it was looking like, oh my gosh, like it's a full occupation of R1 through R4. Like we'd be able to change this if we wanted to.
Sure, yes. To get to your question, do I think that this is going to immediately tomorrow result in our phones ringing off the hook and a proliferation of these? No, I don't think that's very likely. It depends on what it looks like. If it's something that leaves with what's shown right now, I think the chance of these happening in the R1, R2, R3, and R4 is very low. If it gets restricted to something else where there is a huge cost benefit to somebody who is living in a house and they, get an offer for it and they're like, holy cow, I can make a lot of money just selling my house right now than I could get in the fair market for, a different family or something like that, then maybe. But it assumes that there is a surplus of investors, that this is the business model that they want to pursue.
And my very last question, and then I will hold my peace. Because of the conditional use element of it, every single one that wants to go up for one of these is going to have to appear before the BZA, correct?
Or the hearing officer, but yes,
Okay.
some public body.
But so another lever that we might have as a city, if we really were facing, oh my gosh, just too many of these are happening in R1 and R4, is we could, for example, direct the BZA to be like, please stop please stop approving all of these.
Well, so there would be a different solution. There would be a moratorium of some sorts that would suspend the regulation, and then we would have the
Exactly.
opportunity to change that. I don't think we can direct the BZA not to approve it.
They can do whatever they want,
but
but yes.
there would be a better solution if that was
But the point is
goal.
also that the BZA has some say here. Like they, if people felt like there was this huge proliferation, there's another buffer here, barrier that's.
Yeah, I would just be cautious, because the criteria for the BZA, are outlined in the UDO, and so we would have to find a change in findings for something that is those criteria.
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Attorney Lehner.
The question was raised regarding hand inspections earlier, and under the Bloomington Municipal Code, each residential rental unit and premises located within the city shall be inspected by the hand department. That's
Thank
in
you.
Title 16.
Thank you. Any other questions on Amendment 2 before we go to the public? Seeing none, we will go to the public for comments on Amendment 2, so specifically changing the occupancy limit from 2 people per bedroom to 1 person per bedroom in the single-room occupancy. So if there are any comments on that, please come to the podium. Be sure to neatly write your name for the record, and then state your name, and you'll have up to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Vice President. This is Christopher Energy from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. Just a kind of a note from the business community, what I hear on the conditional uses and going through the BZA, that is a hurdle, and it does cause individuals to think if they want to move forward based on the process being slower. I just want to put that note in there for everybody. And also, the BZA, we don't want to overload their cases either. That's not something that can just simply make decisions on everything that comes through, or they would never get anything done. It would backlog them, maybe even more. But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jan Sorby, and I wanted to speak to this because, first of all, I want you all to know I'm in favor of SROs. I'm in favor of rooming houses. My family lived in probably every alternative kind of housing there is. And anyway, I lived in a rooming house, and it provided a very cheap place for me to live when I was going through transition in undergraduate school. And it was 1 person, 1 room. The owner did live on site. They had an apartment on the main floor. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs. And at that time, I actually had a stalker. And having someone on site to take care of cleaning toilets, having a clean shower, squabbling over whose shelf that food was on. The back door was never locked. And so it was a real safety concern for people that lived upstairs. Door was never locked. We had locks on our doors, but to have someone stand outside your door constantly knocking. And we could turn to the person, the owner, and say, hey, do something about this. So I think it's really, really important. So specifically, though, I would love to see both of these forms of housing in this town. I think they're needed. I think that there are a lot of single people, and I think that housing gets gobbled up, and I think that if you have 1 person, 1 room, it will fit the HUD mandates. I think that this housing will not be built without funding. We have Section 8, housing. We have Housing Authority. This is just another tool in the toolbox, and yes, it targets single people. And there's also a mandate in terms of the International Building Code on how much space is needed for 1 or 2 people. I think they say 100 square feet per person, and then 50 or 75, depending on where you live, for the next person. And so consequently, you're getting a bigger room, and it's mandatory for health reasons. And that's why HUD makes these regulations, and it's a good thing. We need Section 8. We need SROs. We need housing that's just simply a rooming house. We need our housing that we have, that the county takes care of. We need all these tools. And I think that this does specifically.
Your time is up.
Oh, I didn't know how much time I have. How much time did I have?
That was 3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. Please consider this. It's very needed.
Is the little screen with the timer on it not working? Okay. Does that little screen by the podium give the time? Oh, okay. Just checking. Is there anybody else who would like to give public comment? Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to give public comment on Amendment 2? Okay. Seeing none, we will come back to council members for final comments prior to a vote on Amendment 2. Would any council members like to comment? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
I have another question. I guess the question is maybe for the sponsor. I think if we were to limit to 1 person, something else needs to change, and I think it's okay to have the owner occupancy, but would you do more bedrooms? I mean, I know this isn't a negotiation, but I think that it doesn't make sense to me for 3 bedrooms, but I do see some places, you know, with, I don't know, a larger number of folks living in 1 bedrooms. But I think for me, the way it is now, I'm not for the 1 person per room.
Other comments from council members? Councilmember Asare?
I think maybe building off of what Councilmember Rosenbarger said, I think I appreciate the concerns raised by Councilmember Rallo. I think that to those concerns, I think that there's plenty of other guardrails currently, and so I don't think that I will be supporting this amendment.
Councilmember Zulik.
Thank you. I'll just say ditto to what's already been said, and I'll add, I think sometimes we kind of hamstring ourselves with overregulation, and I just want to caution against that. But I really do appreciate the work that has gone into creating this amendment and answering all of our questions, so thank you.
Other comments from council members? Councilmember Ruff.
Yeah, I looked into this a little bit. I don't think anywhere else, at least that I was able to find very easily, does multiple people in a single room occupancy. So this is just an experiment, and I think we're just guessing here, and my guess is that we can get what we want, the kind of affordable housing we want for the folks we want, with following the HUD guidelines, taking advantage of programs that might only be allowed if you are following the guidelines, and we will eliminate the chances of potential abuses by adopting this amendment. So I'm going to be supporting this amendment.
Thank you. Other public comment? Council member comment? Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure. I appreciate Councilmember Rallo sent me a citation, which I was just looking at, which is, if I can cite it adequately on the fly, if you Googled section 982.605 SRO housing quality standards, you'd probably find it. He's right that that section does specify one person per unit. I tried to quickly do some additional searching as to the rationale, and I can't find anything particularly like more supportive than that it's a definitional thing, that like by definition, single room occupancy means one person per room. And then I was also trying to search, does HUD have general guidance on whether or not 2 people occupying a bedroom is okay? And I think that is okay. And so, like, I think most people would think that's okay in most contexts. And so I'm not convinced, I guess, that it's like a health and safety issue. I wish I had a little more time to look into it. I do find myself thinking similarly to Councilmember Rosenberger on this, that I would be much more amenable to defining it as single person if we weren't kind of unduly restricting it in other ways. In particular, the owner occupancy requirement. Yeah, some of those things. So, you know, I'm going to vote no on the amendment because the ordinance does have those things. And so I think we're kind of balancing restrictions in a sense. But if for some reason we didn't vote to approve this tonight, I would be interested in like exploring that trade-off a little more. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Any other council member comment on the amendment? Councilmember Brallo, sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to say that I appreciate my colleagues' responses. I'm concerned about the feasibility of the potential for a family occupying a single room in an SRO. It seems the probability is higher having 2 adults to encourage a family to do so. So if that is acceptable for this body, that may be a consequence. And I think the likelihood is reduced by having 1 adult per room. So thank you.
Okay, any other council member comments? If not, I will take a crack at it. So this proposal came out of a series of deliberation sessions we had in 2024 about homelessness and what the city council can do to alleviate homelessness. And through the course of at least one of those meetings, I was in a group with people who provide social services for unhoused folks. And they said a big stumbling block for people coming out of homelessness is that often they are a couple and they want to stay together, but one of them doesn't qualify for the housing and the other one does. Also, this is also a problem I know from my own experience at emergency winter shelter, is that often the rule is, you can't stay together if you're a male and female couple, because the men go to one place and the women to another, and that's been a problem of just keeping people warm and safe because they want to stay together, and so they may not go to a shelter. So going back to those conversations, that's where this whole proposal that we asked for in November of 2024 came from, was those conversations. So in my view, the allowing 2 people is a real response to community input, in that this, in some cases, and I realize it may be a small percentage, but in some cases, this may be a housing type that is available to folks coming out of homelessness. And they want to stay together, and they may need, have a need to stay together to support each other. And so that's why when I authored the resolution asking the Planning Department and the Planning Commission to look at this, it did include try to make it allowable for 2 adults. So that's how we got here, and I appreciate the concerns of Councilmember Rollo by bringing forward this amendment, but they don't rise to a level for me to scale it back and only allow one person. And I, of course, since I've done a lot of research into this, I was fully aware that the HUD definition of an SRO, I mean, it's single room occupancy. You know, logically, single room means one person. So yes, that's how it originated, and that I was aware of that definition. To me, it was just their definition of it. And we can have our own definition, and I know other cities have their own definition. I think it is rare to have a definition that allows two people, but I think in this case, I would like to keep it with the two people. As far as overcrowding, these rental units would be inspected by hand, and so any regulations, International Building Code or safety regulations would be enforced by hand, so I'm not too concerned about that. And I also, I really question whether the probability of having a family live in the room is higher if we allow 2 adults. The majority of families, at least at the New Hope shelter, usually just have 1 adult. So that's just one sample. There are many families at all income levels that have just 1 adult, so I really don't see that it's making it more probable for a family if we allow 2. I mean, if we allow just 1. So.
Madam Chair, I'd like to add one more quick comment if I could.
Councilmember Ruff.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't just at face value in this discussion necessarily agree that the term single room occupancy somehow is logically referring to a single person. I think it's just as likely, probably more likely in my view, that it's referring to the fact that you're leasing a single room. It doesn't have anything to do with referring to how, the people. The single room occupancy to me, it's a single room, not a single person.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say that's the way I view that.
Okay, any other follow-up comments before we vote on Amendment 2? Would the clerk please call the roll on Amendment 2 to ordinance, scroll, 2025-41. Thank you.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
No.
Daley.
No.
Zulik.
No.
Rosenbarger.
No.
Asari.
No.
Flaherty.
No.
Ruff.
Yes.
And Rollo.
Yes.
And that amendment fails with a vote of 2 to 6. We now go back to the ordinance as it was amended through Amendment 1 as a whole. Are there any follow-up questions from council members? Councilmember Asari.
Thank you. Mr. Grulich, I'm sorry, I held my peace on the amendment, and now I will stop holding my peace. We've talked an awful lot about the R1 through R4, but we haven't talked about changes being made elsewhere. Are there changes being made elsewhere?
Not really. It's still a permitted use in all the districts. We excluded it from the MI district, the mixed-use institutional, but you don't really have many dwelling units. Most of the mixed-use institutional are institutional uses, churches, schools, government facilities to some degree.
We did
but
change
otherwise,
it,
outside
to permitted in the ME district from it had been conditional previously, right?
Correct. Yep. So we're changing it from a conditional to a permitted use in the ME.
And then in terms of the owner occupancy, that doesn't apply for the mixed use.
Correct, because one of the use specific standards says that only applies to the R1, R2, R3, and R4.
Thank you.
Other questions from council members? All right, seeing none, we will go to the public for public comment on Ordinance 2025-41.
real quick. I got
Is this a question or?
Well, I got a text message from a constituent who said they wanted to speak during the last public comment for the amendment, and they weren't identified or acknowledged or something. So I just want to say that there may be someone online who still wanted to.
Okay, yes. We'll definitely.
We do have a hand raised online. It was raised after the public comment period on the amendment was closed.
Okay.
But we can certainly open it up for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I didn't see any additional questions from council members, so let's go to public comment on ordinance 2025-41 as amended by Amendment 1. And we can start with the person online. If other people who are on Zoom would like to comment, they can use the raise hand function. And anybody in council chambers who would like to comment can make their way to the podium and, of course, sign in legibly. So let's start with the person online. You should start by stating your name, and then you'll have up to 3 minutes, please.
You should be able to unmute yourself now.
We're waiting for the person on Zoom who had their hand raised to give public comment. So if that's you, please unmute yourself and let us know what you have to say.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name for the record, and you'll have up to 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Eric Ost, and I must admit that I raised my hand for the last public comment period, and so and then I had to step away. So I can offer my comment because it's more of a general comment. Would you like for me to proceed?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so there's some important points that should be clear and may not be yet. One is that effective June 1st, there was a Title 16 interpretation issued by the city that reads, if a residential rental unit is owned by a limited liability corporation or similar entity and is occupied as a primary residence by the incorporator, the governing person, or the registered agent, or their equivalent, then the property shall be treated as occupied by the owner. An LLC is considered an owner. An LLC is considered a person. Why would an LLC not be created for each property existing or to be developed, create a manager-managed LLC operating agreement, incorporate one or more tenants as authorized agents of the LLC as a minority non-controlling member, claim a homestead exemption, pay 1% property tax, and then potentially not register the property as a rental? The SRO concept came out of the 2024 deliberation sessions, and a rental price of $0 to $500 per month was cited. If we're intending single-room occupancy uses to address affordable housing, then this ordinance is not well-formed nor fully baked, with all due respect. A UDO revision that facilitates more affordable single-room occupancy housing can be written and approved. The SRO housing that will be approved if the current language is adopted has been referred to as a dorm that are very unlikely to be affordable. It has been clearly and repeatedly declared that there is no requirement for a hearing by the BZA. And again, with all due respect, throwing spaghetti on the wall to see if it sticks is not an approach we should be taking, especially in Bloomington, where the predominant driver of housing supply and demand is the development, operation, and transfer of market rate rental housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other hand raised on Zoom?
No, there isn't.
Okay. Is there anybody in council chambers who would like to comment? Please come up to the microphone. Remember to sign in if you haven't already and state your name, and you'll have up to 3 minutes.
Hi, again, sorry about the time last time. My name is Jan Sorby. And I do want to say that I researched a lot of different cities, and I could not find one other city that allowed SROs in residential areas. Everybody allowed it in not one city, and everyone allowed it in mixed use and higher. I think Mr. Gulick said to the Plan Commission that he could not find any also. If I'm wrong about that, correct me. And in looking at these different cities, Salt Lake City had a particularly good legislation about SROs. And their legislation looks like this. It's very well thought out, it's very detailed. It covers a lot of different things. It covers the occupancy, of course. It covers number of toilets per bedroom, number of showers per bedroom. It covers square footage for communal space, what spaces cannot be used as communal spaces. It covers the purpose of having the owner or a person on site. It talks about security plans. It talks about cleaning plans. And it has many, many thought-out ideas. And I found it particularly good. I find ours half-baked. I wish that there were more regulations so people know what they're getting into. I think that this is a multifamily type, and there are going to be a lot of people there, and it's hard enough to have your spouse or your children to clean up. And I can tell you from living in a rooming house, nobody wanted to clean, and so there had to be a cleaning schedule. So there are things that are very particular to intense uses. This is an intense use. And the more intense the use, the more problems that can happen. Just like going to a busy intersection, more contact. So I think ours is half-baked. I don't think it's ready for prime time yet. I think it needs a lot of work. And I want to repeat, I do think that these forms are essential. These are really good forms. They're historic forms. And historic, like I said, 7 more minutes. Okay, I also wanted to say that Motel 6, which came down.
That's your time. Sorry.
Was a mistake.
Any other members of the public who'd want to comment, please come to the microphone and legibly write your name, and then you'll have 3 minutes. And start by stating your name as well. Thank you.
My name is Wendy Brisht, and I've been living in the same house that I moved here when I was 4 years old in 1963 in Elm Heights on First and Woodlawn. And I've been a witness of what's happened to upzoning, what happened in the 70s and 80s, which was disastrous. I watched neighborhoods fall. I watched the street that I was on fall into disrepair, into kind of chaos, and whole blocks get lost within just a few years. And then I watched the slow recovery when the 3-person limit was placed again by Mayor Allison. And that was a big deal. And it took about 30 years for the pride to come back. Finally, families with children are moving back. We have across the street a new family with children, and up the street a new family with children. But at the same time, I'm now seeing rentals being increasingly, houses that have never been rentals before, increasingly becoming houses, renting for a lot of money. This plan just seems to be really dangerous for vulnerable neighborhoods. IU is smack dab in the middle of our housing. It's not like it's off to the side. It's smack dab in the middle. And the houses in Elm Heights rent for, they rent years in advance, and they are $1,500 to $2,000 a bedroom now for the nice ones, and the nice ones are being bought up and rented up just as easily for that money. I just wonder how, I lived in, by the way, I lived in a parent-owned house for 2 years on University Avenue, and there's a lot of them. And I can see that being passed down and down and down, and I'm just wondering, how do you propose to protect the housing that's here with this plan? Why is it being allowed in the vulnerable neighborhoods? Because they're already falling now, and I would really like to see more consideration being given to the availability of resident-owned affordable older housing that Bloomington really needs. And this isn't exactly what I had written down, but I wasn't here last week because my neighbor was very sick and I had to take her to the hospital. And that's really, and the neighbor across the street also was willing to help. That's what we need in our neighborhoods. We need real neighborhoods, family neighborhoods. We need some kind of protection against transitioning to completely student rentals. I've seen about 75% of the houses around me transition. And I would just like to see something in this. I think rooming houses are great. I think they should be planned. I agree that this plan is a little bit careless. It's a little bit I know that people want to do something, but that something needs to be in the right direction. It needs to be, so it really does help the right people and not hurt the other people. I would just encourage you to
that's your time. I'm sorry.
Take some time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other hands raised on Zoom? Okay, we'll go to the next person here in chambers.
Hello, my name is John Lawrence. I'll be quick. One thing I want to sort of follow up with something that Jan was trying to get out and didn't have enough time. Her last statement was about the fact that Motel 6 was a lost opportunity. Those are the sort of buildings that get used for SROs. Large cities are protecting old hotels and motels and creating SRO units. And I think that's something you should think about in the future. There are existing hotels that in the future might become available, and maybe the city could be involved in that. And I just then want to reiterate what the person before me was saying. I think we're constantly chipping away at neighborhoods where there is existing housing that is, I know some will disagree with this, but is relatively affordable. We're losing affordable housing. I've seen it happen with duplexes. I've seen $150,000 houses go down, getting replaced with $600,000 and $700,000 units, and then charging $1,000 rent. It's the same sort of thing. We're replacing things that existing with a different. Rather than replacing a form, why don't we add forms? Put them in places where we have space. We have plenty of space. Go drive down Walnut Street. Look, there's all sorts of vacant parking lots. We should be highlighting those areas and not trying to chip away at stuff that exists when we have a need for single-family housing. So I'll end on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for public comment on Ordinance 2025-41. I don't see anybody else in council chambers. Anybody on Zoom? Okay. Well, we will come back to council for final comments on Ordinance 2025-41. Would any council member like to comment?
May I ask a quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted Mr. Gerlich's opinion of the owner occupancy requirement. Is Mr. Ost brought up a potential scenario where an LLC owns the property. It is, as a legal entity, a person. It bestows that legal definition to an agent of the LLC who lives on the property, happens to be a tenant. But is that something that could potentially be problematic for the owner occupancy requirement? Have you encountered that or thought about that?
I would have to check with the auditor on that because sounds like a specific element of the homestead exemption language. So I don't have an answer on that tonight. But
Okay.
I mean, it's possible.
Well, again, we're incentivizing the potential for profit making here under certain circumstances. And so, all right. That
I mean,
would be an
obviously,
unknown.
setting up an LLC is not an easy thing. So there would be lots of steps you'd have to go through to even be able to do that.
Well, I did it in the afternoon when we bought our farm. But anyway, I wonder if this could be problematic. Anyway, thank you for your response.
Okay. Council member comments on the legislation. Who would like to make a comment before we go to a vote? Council member, sorry.
Thank you. I'm a little conflicted in the sense that, I share some of residents' comments that this may be. I think we often hear the things that we're doing aren't ready for prime time or something like that, and I think in some sense I share that. I share that position, but perhaps for different reasons. Namely, because this is, at the end of the day, all that we're doing here is allowing two people to live in residential. That's the change that we've made. It's a fairly small, fairly incremental change, and I don't know if we're addressing. As Mr. Grulich pointed out multiple times, the thing that we as a council really wanted to address, but then and so I'm trying to get some estimate of, what is the likelihood that, that we create, an awful lot of housing here. It seems very low. That being said, I think that as Vice President Piedmont Smith has said multiple times, I think that it's, if it's 300 new available units, I think that's better than zero. But I do think that it may be interesting to think about some of these levers in relationship to each other. I'm not suggesting that we push this aside, but I do think that it's something that we should continue to revisit, just so that we actually can move forward with trying to create more possibilities and pathways to affordable housing. But I'll be voting yes tonight, but I do just feel like there's a lot more that we need to continue to do in this space. And I have a little bit more. I will just say, I think also because I hadn't turned off my mic. I recognize a lot of the concerns I think that residents have raised, that Councilmember Rallo has raised, but I think that we've put a lot of restrictions already with the owner occupancy. I hear what Mr. Ost said, the conditional use. I think that we would have a lot of runway here, that if you saw this going in the wrong direction, that we'd be able to course correct. But again, I don't see the threat with the many barriers that we've put in place to those of you who are particularly concerned of this, just huge proliferation of this, and that our neighborhoods are all going to change and all. I think these. I don't see those arguments taking place here with all of the guardrails that are in place. So, though I hear all of those concerns. I will be voting yes. Okay, now I'm finished. But
Other council member comments? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Hi, thank you. I plan to vote yes on this. Some bullet points in no particular order, as usual. I love that Salt Lake City legislation, and I'm going to come back to that. The first question is, do we use other cities as examples here or do we not? Just because when we were dealing with duplexes, we absolutely couldn't use other cities as examples. But now we're using Salt Lake City. I am all for using other cities as examples and legislation ideas, and I would love to keep doing that. For example, it might be Hopi. Boulder had a big movement. Bedrooms are for people. We have 5-bedroom homes here that are not being used to their full rental capacity because we have a 3 unrelated rule. So we have bedrooms that are going empty. Other communities are changing this. That's something else we could look at. So with that Salt Lake City legislation, there were some really good things in there. I think I agree also with Mr. MG. Conditional is a mess. I would be happy to, number 1, pass this tonight. Number 2, amend to add more details, like the bathrooms per bedrooms, for example. And then number 3, bring it back amended and as a permitted use in R1 to R4. Another note, I do remember November 2023. It's so confusing with Councilmember Strasburg up there. Okay, it's just distracting a little. Okay. I was hoping that we could do something like an 8. I remember we talking about it around the table, that maybe something like an 8-bedroom, single-room occupancy in residential neighborhoods. But here we are, 3 bedrooms for 6 people in residential. So I guess it's something. I do think a resident commented that these might look like dorms. I think that's great because we can call them dorms or we can call them rooms without full-blown kitchens. And I think there's a great need out there for people to rent smaller spaces, and a lot of people don't cook or use kitchens. They don't need to pay for that space. So I think this is a great way to offer something that is missing middle housing for a lot of folks, and that can also be college students. I know a lot of folks come to college and don't cook or aren't interested in it, and so really don't need that whole kitchen. And just the final note, this is mostly off topic, but you can build a 15-bedroom house right now without needing any special permissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council member comment? Councilmember Rallo.
Yes, I'm sure I think we should compare us to other cities, and particularly ones that have demographics like our own. I don't think Salt Lake City meets that test, but in any case, I also think that we should draw on the experience of people in the community that have already seen bad outcomes of various policies in the past, and so not repeat them. So. And it's my experience that restrictions after the fact are generally more difficult than to deploy than anticipating those outcomes and preventing them. And so I do see some potential for adverse outcomes. I like the idea of boarding houses. I like the idea of single-room occupancy. I think that what's being ignored is the potential for certain very likely scenarios, particularly when profit incentives exist. So I'm concerned about too many people occupying a room. I'm concerned about incentivizing the circumvention of our over-occupancy code. And I'm also concerned that the conditional use for the R1, R4 simply now requires staff approval and not a public hearing before the BZA. My understanding was our council attorney, her opinion was that it does go before the BZA. Planning and transportation staff say it's the opposite. So I'm a bit in a quandary regarding that, but I think that it requires a public hearing, should have that before it occupies a neighborhood. So for those reasons, I'm afraid I'll have to vote against this. But I appreciate the effort that's gone into it, and I'm hoping bad outcomes don't materialize. Thanks.
Other council member comments? Councilmember Ruff.
You know, this is not a criticism of staff at all. It was difficult, as staff explained, to try and deal with this initiative that was carried to, or directed to staff by council. In this case, it was very difficult. It feels it's experimental to me, and I see the risks of, the downsides, without having a more thorough set of expectations and rules, and without me understanding better when I came in. I don't fully understand the difference between how this will be handled in terms of BZA versus hearing officer compared to duplexes, compared to ADUs. So given all these questions I still have, and the fact that I do think it's experimental with risks, potential risks that, to me right now, thinking about it, outweigh the benefits potentially, more likely than not. So I'm going to vote no tonight on this.
Other council member comments? Councilmember Stossberg, do you want to weigh in? We see you on the screen. Okay.
I'll apologize for a minute. I'm just getting out of a school event, so I don't feel as though it's. My understanding right now is that Amendment 1 passed, and then Amendment 2 did not pass on this. I don't know what has been discussed and what has not been discussed. I heard Councilmember Rosenbarger commenting regarding some concerns about bathroom access, because there's not, as it's written, anything about minimum number of bathrooms required, and that is something that I talked about with staff through the Plan Commission process, and because of enforcement sort of challenges with that and what standards we would set with that, it did not end up being something that made it into the final bill. So at this point, I'm comfortable with that, and I think I'm comfortable with the changes as it was, and then the changes from Amendment 1. So I will be voting in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council members would like to comment? Okay, I'll just make a few comments. I agree with a lot of what has been said. I understand the hesitation on the part of some residents and colleagues, but I think that as far as housing and the housing crisis we're in, we need to do everything we can to provide more housing options. And I think this is one small part of the answer. As for converting hotels, I appreciate two members of the public bringing up the Motel 6 situation. I know that the director of HAND about a year ago was talking to a couple of other hotels that were on the market to be sold. I don't think that came to anything, but I know that the city would be interested in an opportunity like that to convert to SRO. So I think, they are on the lookout for that. Coming back to Councilmember Rollo's concern about having a family live in a room, there was a documentary I watched a couple years ago about families struggling to keep housing, especially during the pandemic. And there was a mother with 2 or 3 children living in one room, and they were very grateful because they had a place to live. So I'm not saying that most of these are will be used for people coming out of homelessness, but I want to allow that and allow people who have extra bedrooms also who are not money-making, LLCs to make the bedrooms available in their homes. So I think there are enough guardrails here that it will not have a big negative impact on neighborhoods. If you recall, in 2021, there was a huge debate about duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, and what we've seen since then is that very few have been built and that the neighborhoods were not destroyed. So I think that those concerns, I understand the concerns. I mean, I live in a neighborhood where, houses are also becoming rentals, but I think that would happen regardless of what we do about SROs. And the more housing we can provide, the more opportunities there are for people who don't have housing now or can't afford the housing now. So I'll be voting in favor. If there are any if there are no final comments, Councilmember Rollo.
Yes, just to say that I think that there are a lot of pressures on one's ability to afford a house in this community. Single-family homes are under threat. They're under threat through Airbnbs. They're under threat through being bought up by large owners, equity firms, and so forth. But I would say that we had evidence the other day that there is a steady progression of plexing occurring in the community, as Mr. Hiddle demonstrated. And year by year, we're losing not a few, but cumulatively a significant amount of single-family homes, becoming rare for people to establish in ownership, equity, and so forth. So, which is a shame because we're turning into a rental community instead of one of owner occupancy. Thank you.
All right. If there are no other comments, will the clerk please call the roll on ordinance 2025-41?
Councilmember Daley.
As amended. Sorry.
Councilmember Daley.
Yes.
Zulik.
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Asari.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Ruff.
No.
Rollo.
No.
And Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Legislation is adopted by a vote of 6-2.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hopi, yeah.
I apologize, Councilmember Stossberg.
That's okay. I jumped in a little late tonight. So yes.
All right. So that legislation passes by a vote of 7-2. And we can then go to the next item on the agenda, which is additional public comment on items not on the agenda. Is there anybody who would like to comment on things not on the agenda that did not do so at the start of the meeting? Are there any hands raised on Zoom? Okay. So then we come to council schedule, and we have a proposed annual council legislative schedule for 2026 in our packet. And if there are no concerns or revisions, we could try to vote on this evening. If you would like more time, let us know. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the draft proposed schedule? Yes, Councilmember Asari.
One positive comment. I think that it's great that the first 2 months that we only scheduled 2 meetings, I think to give some flexibility. I've been on this soapbox forever that if we overbook, and then it makes it sometimes difficult to do things as they emerge. So with that in mind, though, I'm wondering if towards the end of the, like the time that we're in right now, I think we've run into a handful of things this year where, we wanted to schedule things and the year gets quite compact. So I'm just wondering if we wanted to dispense of one of the scheduled meetings just to have a little bit of flexibility there, or one of the deliberation sessions. But I think broadly speaking, any time that we minimize the amount of scheduled meetings is a good thing. I support.
Any other comments or questions about the proposed schedule? Yeah, I think that, oh, wait, is that a hand raise? Like Councilmember Strasburg? Okay. Go ahead, Council President Strasburg.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to appreciate Isak's idea about eliminating one of the later meetings in the year. And I think one of the things is we have a lot of legislation right now at the end of the year too, so I'm hesitant to eliminate any of our later meetings at this time. I do want to make a note though that we did eliminate one of the meetings that we did have this year. This year we had a meeting on September 30th as another regular session, and I realized on that date this year that by the time we didn't have a meeting, we had a meeting every week except for one since our summer recess had come back, like a meeting of some kind, a special meeting or other. And so I was like, okay, let's give a week off in there just because it's really intense to have so many weeks of meetings, both on council members and also on staff. So to Councilmember Asari's point, I did think about that when working on the schedule with Attorney Lehner.
Thank you. And I will just say, I also like the fact that we do not have the deliberation sessions in January and February because we will be very busy with our interview committees, especially since starting in January, we'll have council liaisons assigned to boards and commissions. And so that process will require an extra meeting probably of the interview committees. So hopefully lightening the meeting schedule will allow for those interview committees to do their work. Councilmember Asari?
May I make one just logistical suggestion? Because we have said in the past that one of the reasons why we set our calendar ahead of time, yes, it's for us, for example, for staff to know when to schedule things and so on. But one of the other logistical things that we have brought up in the past is that we need to also know when we book out the space. What I would suggest is that we just always have Wednesdays booked out regardless of whether we've scheduled a meeting, because so that in the case that we want to have an emergency meeting or that we don't run into this someone else is using council chambers type of situation. And then that way we can dispense with meetings or schedule them as necessary as things emerge. But, again, I've been on the soapbox the whole time. I'm very much for us being a bit more agile with our approach to scheduling and meeting to allow us to sort of contract and grab as necessary.
Well, since the matter of reserving this room for Wednesday nights that are not on this list of meeting dates, that I suppose could be decided between the council president and the staff, either this council president or the one starting in January. So any other comments? And if not, I would entertain a motion on this, adopting the schedule.
Motion to adopt the annual council legislative schedule for 2026.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Any final comments, questions? Will the clerk please call the roll on adoption of the 2026 schedule?
Councilmember Zulik.
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Asari.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Ruff.
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Strasburg.
Yes.
And Daly.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other schedule items to review? I I don't think so. We will not meet next week. I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and we will meet again on December 3rd. Thank you.